There were a lot of consequences to the Albigensian Crusade. Just to name only one to begin with, where do you start? It completely destroyed Languedoc culture. As I said, Languedoc really had its own identity. The whole name of the place reflects this. Languedoc, language of the Oc. And the reason why they called it Oc is because instead of saying we for yes, they would say Oc. And so that became their nickname. So they really saw themselves as very, very different to those places around them. Another massive repercussion was the increased power of the King of France. Not only did the King of France manage to gain control of a huge swathe of the south of France that he previously had pretty minimal control over, he also managed to establish a very close relationship with the papacy. And this is going to reach its zenith later in the Middle Ages with the Avignon papacy, whereby we can argue that the Pope is merely a tool of the French king. As you will no doubt already be thinking, wow, how is this a crusade? Is this a crusade? What's going on here? It really reflects the change, a massive change in the ideology of the Crusades. Instead of becoming an armed pilgrimage, this is a religious war. And a lot of the time we do think of crusades as religious wars, but as we know, as we've kind of talked in class, and we've talked about it more about being Jerusalem being the focus. This is such a different situation from what we've been talking about before. The reason why I like to insert this here before the Fourth Crusade is because there's pretty clear parallels with the contemporary Fourth Crusade. So the Crusades by this time period are becoming very overtly political rather than having this as part of the dimension. Another aspect of it being political is the death of Peter of Aragon at the Battle of Muret. Peter of Aragon was a Christian king of Spain. He was a key player in the political and religious history at the time, and he was killed on the side that was ostensibly against the Pope. I mean, this would have been even not a couple of decades before the event, just unfathomable to people. Raymond, the Counts of Toulouse, Raymond's Counts of they are all called Raymond, but we can't just be as simple as that. They're deprived of their lands. Raymond VII is outright declared a heretic, and the Peace of Paris in 1229 ends their family, really. They're called the House of Saint Gilles. They had a hugely long crusading history. They were previously viewed as being inveterate defenders of the faith, and it's got to the point where they are, made nobodies, essentially. After the political effects, in terms of the actual people who live there, I mean, it's a period of terror erupts. The believers were terrified. Really what happens after the warfare part is that they then try and eliminate the Cathar Church over the first third of the 14th century from the roots up. And despite all the church's efforts to quell the Cathars, even before the Albigensian Crusade, the most effective part of it is only when a new group of religious men who provide an orthodox solution arrive on the scene. They provide a new religious outlet for the Occitans, who were questioning the corruption of the church. And this was assisted by the replacement of the Count of Toulouse and the development of a new political culture in Occitania. So through these processes, the Cathars were finally eliminated from the very fabric. They were so intrinsic to this society. Who am I referring to here? The Dominicans. The Dominicans, this reforming mendicant order sometimes you're like, why are they not viewed as being heretical as well? But they are reforming parts of the church, and they come in and are the most effective aspect of the church's actions against the Languedoc heresy. So what the major tool that they had to do this was the Inquisition, which is a term I've no doubt you've heard before. It's kind of entered into pop culture now. And this is really the successful element in removing Catharism rather than outright warfare. So an Inquisition, one of the big names writing about heresy and Inquisition is Christine Caldwell Ames, and she defines it as being like an intersection between a crusade, penance, and spiritual disciplining. It was a form of law that was widely practiced by this point, but Inquisition is best known for rooting out heresies in this context. We know about it because they kept regular records, so a lot of it is actually documented. So including one of your primary sources for class today is for you to discuss in the Flipgrid next, but it kind of gives you an insight into how record keeping and documentation was essential to Inquisition. Really what they're trying to do is to test whether the person they're questioning has learned anything heretical. But the point is, who hasn't heard something heretical? Everybody's heard something heretical. And of course, in Languedoc, of course they've heard things heretical. Doesn't necessarily mean they believe it or follow it, but of course they've heard it. Really, the Inquisition is trying to use the medieval university taught skill of rhetoric and logic to trick people. They're trying to get people to trip themselves up. The whole point being is that if they find that they've lied under oath, then they can then be sent to court, including the regular courts, not just the church's court. And they're also encouraging people to commit testimonies against one another as well. So I'm going to end it here. You can discuss Inquisition more in the Flipgrid, and then I've given you another question to discuss as well. And once you've completed this Nearpod and Flipgrid, the next one is going to be on the Northern Crusades.